Hello and welcome to the big picture. The Indo-Pakistan border across Jammu and Kashmir has started resembling a war zone. The skirmishes which one was used to has turned into major hostilities, heightening the tensions. This has resulted in loss of several lives, both civilian and security men, including women and children on both sides of the border. The tit-for-tat scenario has witnessed firing across the borders, with Indian Army and BSF claiming to have destroyed 14 Pakistani bunkers and killing 3 Pakistani soldiers yesterday. On the Indian side, the shelling from Pakistani Rangers has resulted in death of 8 persons and injury to at least 20 persons yesterday. With the two nuclear-armed nations raising the ante, the international community is watching with trepidation. Meanwhile, the Indian government is talking of more such retaliatory attacks if Pakistan continues to violate ceasefire conditions and assists in infiltration of terrorists. However, as the casualties rise and more civilians face the brunt, the Indian government is also concerned. Prime Minister today held a high-level meeting to review the security along the LOC and the international border. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif also faces uncertainty as the Supreme Court there has ordered a probe in the Panama Papers scandal. Today, we will look at the escalating tensions, what has been the cause for it, and where it is heading. To discuss this, I have with me Rakesh Sood, former ambassador and distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, Major General retired Ashok Mehta, a security analyst, Manoj Joshi, senior fellow, Observer Research Foundation and a senior journalist, and on the phone line from Islamabad is Imtiaz, a political analyst and senior journalist. Welcome to all of you. General Mehta, this kind of escalation of tension, is it normal after what we have seen in the last couple of months? This kind of escalation, is it normal?
No, of course not. This is quite unusual. In fact, the last time we saw such grave intensity of fire on the line of control and across the line of control, the kind of exchanges that have taken place between the two sides was during Operation Parakram, when the Indian Army was deployed in totality on the line of control. So that
this was after the Parliament attack.
Parliament attack on Parliament, Operation Parakram, and it was with great intensity that fire assaults. The LOC was crossed when posts were destroyed by the Indian side and retaliatory action took place. So this is not at that scale, because the army is not deployed for war, but it is certainly deployed for preventive war. And the second part of your question relates to how did this start? Well, it started, as we all know, with the unrest in Jammu and Kashmir, spiraling into the Uri attack. The Uri attack was the escalation after the Uri attack was what we are calling target-specific, limited caliber cross-LOC strikes, and which the army calls surgical rate strikes. Now that led to the Pakistanis beheading our soldier recently, and the beheading led to the Indian Army claiming that 4 posts had been destroyed in Jammu and Kashmir, and then the Pakistanis transferring the intensity towards the international border, and now they are targeting civilians. So this is escalation by both sides and claiming victories by destroying each other's posts. So where we are going, I cannot say at the moment, but if you are asking me whether this will lead to war, my answer is no.
We will not. We will come to that. But you know, the situation is quite intense and is a matter of great concern. Rakesh Sood, how do you look at this escalation?
Well, I think it is unfortunate because we don't seem to have a political objective behind it. Ultimately, any kind of military action has to conclude with the achievement of a political objective. Earlier, Prime Minister Modi had talked about the fact that we were moving towards international isolation
Right.
of Pakistan. Now, to a great extent, I would say that has been achieved. But then, continuous tensions and hostilities along the line of control also attracts attention, international attention towards the situation in Jammu and Kashmir, and something which we naturally do not find a welcome development. So I think there is a careful line, a delicate line that we have to observe in terms of drawing attention to Pakistan's inability to control terrorist groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Toiba, and at the same time to ensure that the situation remains managed and under control on the line of control, so that the focus is not on what is happening at Jammu and Kashmir to bring in international attention or unwarranted advice in terms of how to manage developments.
Okay, that's very interesting what you say, that there doesn't seem to be a political a kind of anyway. Coming to let me get Imtiaz Gul in on this, Mr. Gul. How is it being looked at from Pakistani side? It's very interesting that I have been observing the Pakistani media. It doesn't seem to have taken these hostilities across on the border, as seriously as the Indian media and the Indian and India seems to be taking. And why is this?
Well, all I can say is that in these particular situations, people usually tend to run the risk of resonating the respective establishment's viewpoint. We have heard from our military and security apparatus about the unprovoked firing, which has resulted in injuries and the deaths of many people on this side, as much as your people have been talking about what is coming from the Indian establishment. Now, if the Indian media has picked it up, that certainly betrays the pattern that had started with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi by trying to bring Balochistan between the two countries and trying to deflect attention from what is happening in the Indian part of Kashmir. Whereas in Pakistan, we have other issues as well. We have been talking of casualties, war, conflict for the past 15 years. And obviously this is cross-border firing or line of control skirmishes. This is not part of the national discourse, much as it has turned into a discourse in the Indian media because it's coming from the top. The government itself is leading this war on Pakistan, verbal war, and that's why I think the media has pounced upon it.
But what about the Pakistani government? There is this feeling that the retaliation from the Pakistani side, which is happening quite a bit, it is in the interest of the Pakistan Prime Minister finds himself in a situation where he seems to have been cornered because the latest order of the Supreme Court. So there are certain people, certain analysts who feel that for Pakistan, for the Pakistan Prime Minister, it's also convenient to ensure that these kind of tensions continue so that the issues get diverted as far as his domestic problems are concerned. I think Imtiaz Gul's line has got disconnected. We'll go back to him. Manoj Joshi, it's very interesting what Rakesh Sood said about what is the aim behind this kind of escalation of tensions. How do you look at it? What is the Indian government's line on this? You think that it is the Indian government is involved, or do you think that at the local level the armed forces are responding to what is happening at the border?
Well, one of the interesting things is that, look, these kind of shelling, etc., has happened in the past also. There's nothing, I'm talking of back in between 1996, 97, down to around 2003. What is very surprising, I was looking at India's leading Hindi newspaper today. I won't mention names. And the lead headline struck me. It was talking about how we have destroyed 14 Pakistani posts and killed 7 Pakistani Jawans. And so it was as a kind of a great victory was being put across. On the other hand, the fact that the Pakistanis retaliated and a number of Indian civilians were killed was put lower down in the story. I would have thought that the fact that Indian citizens have been killed, innocent people, civilians have been killed, 400 villages have been, not 400, I don't know the exact number, but I know 400 schools have been shut down. I thought that is the big story from the Indian point of view. Meaning, so what is happening is that you are getting reportage of war reporting as to what we are doing to the other fellow, not reporting as to the cost that we are also paying on our side of the border. So this seems to be skewed, and it seems to be part of the kind of discourse that has taken over in this country in the recent month.
Okay. General Mehta,
Yeah,
the civilian costs, the difference now is that why are we also taking note of it is the kind of civilian costs which is being incurred, not only this side, on both sides.
Yeah, when you have this kind of tit for tat, these are fire assaults. This is firing through mortars. We do not know whether artillery has been used. I haven't read anywhere that artillery has been used. They're talking of 82 and 122 millimeter mortars. And we normally respond in kind, which means we may not have used our artillery. So that's the first point. Sometimes when you have cross-border firing, some rounds fall short. So this case where a mother and her daughter were killed in the field, this could be a case of a round falling short. This happens quite frequently. But the DGBSF has categorically claimed today in his press conference that the Pakistanis are deliberately targeting civilians. Now that is very possible. And so therefore in this battle of escalation, targeting of civilians will cause pain to the administration, not so much to people who are on posts who are inside bunkers. So unless you get a direct hit
on the bunker,
you're not vulnerable, or you're not you don't suffer casualties. The second point I want to make is very interesting. What Ambassador Sood, Rakesh Sood said, that what is the objective?
What is the objective?
Very clearly the objective is, for what the Indian side did, is to deter cross-border terrorism. We tried that diplomatically. That's a political objective. We tried that diplomatically. We are now trying it militarily. Obviously, we are not going to succeed militarily because non-state actors will not be deterred. If we are targeting only the terrorists will not be deterred by the cross LOC strike.
No, but General Mehta,
and therefore, unless you target the Pakistan army, which is behind the terrorist strikes, this political objective will not be achieved.
But General Mehta, in the last, these strikes which are happening now, the shelling which is happening, the kind of attacks which is taking place, non-state actors doesn't seem to figure in this kind in the present round.
We have to draw a distinction between what is called fire assaults and cross LOC strikes. Now, cross LOC strikes means that your regular commandos are crossing the line of control, going and hitting 5 or 6 objectives, as we did on 29 September. We've done it once. The other confusion is about destroying posts. DGBSF used word posts and bunkers in the same breath. Now, if you destroy a bunker, you have not destroyed the post. So I do not know why this terminology...
Today there seems to be a confusion about that terminology.
The terminology between post consists of a number of bunkers.
Yes.
And a solitary bunker is just part of that post. So
Absolutely.
when we say we destroyed 4 posts or we have destroyed 14 bunkers, one doesn't know what they are talking about.
Rakesh, Sood, General Mehta's argument is interesting. He says that we had tried the diplomatic, objective, the diplomatic methods, and now we are using military methods. Yeah. And how important is this, and how are we going to? You think that there's diplomatically there'll be some problems as far as this is concerned?
I think that finding the right balance is a difficult task, and you would remember we have discussed this on your program earlier. The confusion about terminology that General Mehta referred to, I think it is important because it began with the use of the phrase surgical strikes by DGMO in his press briefing after the 29th September firing, and when our special forces had gone across. And thereafter, the same phrase was not used by the Foreign Secretary in his briefing to the Parliamentary Committee while briefing the members of Parliament. That also led to a certain degree of confusion. Now we have this additional confusion about posts and bunkers and so on, and whether this is, what exactly is this operation? That is why it brings me back to the basic question that I had posed, that we need to be very clear, any military action, however limited or extensive, needs to have ultimately a political objective. Now, in our case, I would say that any military action that we would have should eventually have the long-term objective, of course, would be to change the behavior of the Pakistan army. And if, as General Mehta said, what we want to do is we want them to avoid incursions across the line of control, we want to deter them, we want to deter the terrorists from coming across the line of control, then we need to understand whether or not this action, does it help us in achieving that objective, or is it a more limited objective, namely domestic audiences? And that is the question that we need to ponder over.
I think that's a very important point which you made. Let me get Mr. Gul, Mr. Imtiaz Gul. How much is the domestic problems of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif responsible for this kind of situation here? Because some analysts here feel that it's convenient for him to keep this going to divert the attention domestically.
Well, I think, again, I would go back to the word confusion. What I have heard so far is, what I can gather is that the narrative on Pakistan, the narrative on the hostilities on the border are also accompanied by confusion. And similar confusion, I think, surrounds the role of Nawaz Sharif. I think most of your analysts often say Nawaz Sharif has no role in Pakistan, that it's the military establishment that calls the shots on the policy with India or Afghanistan. So I think I will not go into that as to whether they are confused, whether Nawaz Sharif is using this or not. All I would say is that it's a tragedy that the discourse on human losses, injuries to human beings, has become securitized. And while we sit in our drawing rooms, in our comfort zones, and we are simply picking up on what the militaries on both sides are telling us, I don't think this is as much a problem here. In Pakistan, it's very clear the narrative is coming from the military, and that there are casualties being reported. Now, I cannot verify sitting here whether it's the Indian unprovoked firing or the Pakistani unprovoked firing, or the reality is somewhere in between. That's why I think it's an extremely risky task when we on television are trying to justify the dehumanization of a humanitarian problem. And I think we should desist from it, and the kind of confusion that has followed the claim of surgical strike and what I was just hearing also makes it clear that most of analysts in both countries simply jump to conclusions without properly analyzing, without going deeper into what is coming from the establishment of their country.
Okay. I think you have made very fair points there. Yes, General Mehta.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on what Imtiaz Gul has said. On for whom does the tension on the line of control suit more, the Pakistanis or the Indian side? Now, the Indian side has done what it had to do, that is the surgical strikes. It has taken it off its chest. The Pakistanis, on the other hand, and given the internal situation in Pakistan as Imtiaz Gul has described, Mr. General Rahil Sharif is going to ride into the sunset on 29th November. He doesn't want to go with the default legacy of the surgical strikes having been carried out and claimed. So there has to be a retaliatory strike.
That's interesting.
And the beheading is only the beginning of that retaliatory strike.
So you have added
the tension on the line of control suits the Pakistan army till the decision on who the next chief of army staff is going to be. Is Rahil Sharif going to decide or Nawaz Sharif going to decide?
Rahil Sharif or the GSQ wouldn't be that childish, I would say.
Sorry,
It's a
Imtiaz.
very immature sort of estimate of suggestion that is being made. I mean, the situation I don't think should be tied to General Rahil Sharif's retirement. He had made it very clear 10 months ago that he is not interested in any extension.
Okay, he's not interested in. He says that he was not interested. He's not interested in a extension, but retaliation maybe that when he's riding into the sun, maybe he wants to leave some legacy behind. I mean, let's not speculate on those things. But Manoj Joshi, the point made by Rakesh Sood about the objective, the political objective behind this kind of attempts. It's very interesting. The finance minister has said today that what is happening now, the kind of retaliation which is taking place against Pakistan and he was talking about ceasefire, being the 2003 ceasefire being violated repeatedly by Pakistan. So, and he says that this is going to be the pattern. The pattern of retaliation which we are witnessing now is going to be the pattern, and what he calls as the new normal. So, can we say that this kind of escalated tensions will be there for us to bear for quite some time to come?
Well, I think so, and I think that one of the important aspects of this are domestic compulsions both in Pakistan as well as in India. Don't forget that the media play on this cross-border bombardment is more in northern India than in Pakistan.
Yes.
So obviously there is a domestic constituency, and as I explained to you in the previous thing, that how some of the Hindi newspapers are reporting in terms of war, in the sense that it's we bombarding them, taking out their posts. I don't know how BSF does its battle damage assessment, but they seem to have a great deal of information as to the exact number of posts they have taken out, the exact number of people they have killed. But as I said, they don't seem to say much about the disruption that is taking place on the Indian side, the destruction, the difficulties that the villagers are facing on the Indian side. Now, insofar as what is happening is concerned, the point is that, as I said, between 1996 and 2003, this was going on. And what we are really seeing is we are going back to that situation. Now, Rakesh has a very important point as to what's your eventual objective. Now, the government, to my mind, had taken a fairly sophisticated policy, which began with pressuring Pakistan, naming and shaming Pakistan in international fora,
and isolating them.
The BRICS meeting, in the Group of 20 meeting, they boycotted SAARC, and then also they carried out the limited surgical strike. So all these were designed to basically pressure Pakistan to stop supporting the militants on their side, the militants who come across to India. Now, my point is, are we overdoing it? Meaning, if there is a breakdown, my view is, if there is a breakdown of the 2003 ceasefire, it is India which stands to lose. And I will explain to you why. Number one, it is under the cover of border LOC bombardment that militants used to get across, meaning they use the bombardment as cover to come across on the Indian side, number one. Number two, if this bombardment resumes and if artillery also comes into the picture, as General Mehta has spoken about, then our border fencing will be destroyed in no time. And so we will actually facilitate the entrance of more militants into this country.
Okay.
So the point I'm trying to make is that the breakdown of the ceasefire certainly does not suit us.
Okay.
And the tension, the bombardment of the ceasefire line suits Pakistan more than it suits us.
Okay. Rakesh, Sood, would you agree with that? And also, now that this kind of escalation has happened, do you also agree that this is something which we will have to live with for quite some time? Or do you think that there is a possibility of some kind of a, talks resuming or at least, some kind of second, third, or whatever talks which can happen behind the scenes at least?
Well, I am not sure if this will... First of all, let me say I would tend to agree with Manoj that a breakdown of the ceasefire or a very active ceasefire with artillery firing across the line of control is something that suits Pakistan much more than it suits us. I completely agree. I share that assessment given by Manoj. However, at the same time, I think that Prime Minister Modi has, in the past also, he has shown a fair amount of ability to turn political situations, to take political risks. So I think what he is doing is he's kind of testing the waters in terms of how far we can go in terms of the escalation across the line of control. And at some point, it should be possible. There has to be a sort of climb down on both sides. It may perhaps wait the appointment of the new chief, and I think that it is quite clear that the way the Pakistani media has been talking about the appointment of the new chief and what Imran Khan had threatened, which has just been called off because the Supreme Court is now taking cognizance of the corruption by setting up a special commission, the commission against probing into corruption charges against Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and 3 of his children. I think all of this will take about another few weeks to settle down. And then my guess is at that stage we will see some kind of political move. Perhaps the 2 national security advisors will talk to each other quietly and will find a way of climbing down from the situation.
Very quickly, what about the international pressure? That doesn't seem to have come in as yet.
Well, the international... Not as yet, because for the very simple reason that the US is preoccupied with its own elections. And we have the election on 8th. So therefore, I think international pressure would in any case, the first sort of lead would in that sense come from the US. And Europe is preoccupied. You have Russia preoccupied in Syria and so on. So in a sense, we've not seen much of international pressure. But once the elections are over in the United States, once the political environment in Pakistan settles down, because what exactly does Imran Khan's withdrawal from his earlier statement that on 2nd November it was going to be a lock-in of the capital of Islamabad, as he had earlier said, and it was going to be indefinite. And now he is calling it a celebration. So we'll have to wait to see that.
Very quickly, sir. We don't have time.
I want to say that after Parakram, a study was carried out by the army. While both those reasons given by Manoj Joshi are absolutely right, that it favors the guns that we use, the Bofors and the 130 millimeter guns, caused a lot of pain and hurt to the Pakistan army. And the other reason, of course, is that we do not want the line of control. I think we must de-escalate, and the first real opportunity will come when the Heart of Asia conference will take place in New Delhi, when Sadad Aziz will be here. That's the real opportunity.
I think on that note we'll end, but the escalation which has happened is something which all of us need to be concerned about. The civilian casualties are something very, very serious. But let us hope that these tensions will de-escalate sooner than we expect. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in the big picture, same time tomorrow.